Ah, yes, my old steam engines. Like I say, I used to run steam mining equipment, steam drilling, and also steam, lots of steam stuff. Like I said, some of the biggest steam engines. I did steam textiles. I had, there's this one little place, actually somewhere around Central Park. I had steam engines in the ground. I had steam engines on top of the ground. I had steam engines at ground level. And what the really old steam engines look like I said, I had one of the largest brick manufacturers in the world. I also had my own slate mine with my own private fleet of ships. But what they used to do is they used to build these brick catacombs, right? And they would have a steam fan generator, this great big steam-powered fan, basically, that would spin, and it would blow air through this network system of tunnels and stuff like that. And I think it had maybe even an automatic loader where the cable cars would come up and they would dump the stuff. And later on, we had an auto loading system where it could just carry the logs or the wood chips or the coal. I think they did a variety of, like, it was wood chips and it was coal mixed together, basically. The green wood, basically, because green wood doesn't burn if you have it in log form, but if you chip it, it burns really good. So they would chip up the trees into like these wood chips with some coal or coke. And I had steam engine primer people, and they would get that mixture just right, just a little bit of fat, a little bit of oil, a little bit of alcohol, and just burns. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, so they were. I paid these guys really well. Anyway, so they would take the bricks and they would build these big bricks because back in the old days, like mostly we used copper, and because steel, we didn't really have stable steel. Steel, it's tended to rust and flake on its own. So we had to use copper and some gold and some other stuff, some mixture of metals, to get these pipes so they wouldn't corrode or rust, and they could maintain high heat levels. Because that was another thing is being able to take like 1,000 degrees or 2,000 degrees, although you don't really need that much heat for steam, but especially if you do low pressure steam, which is what I did a lot of low pressure steam, but I also did high pressure steam too, though. It depended on the thing. Like I like to have I like the engines you just light and then they would just slowly burn all day long, and they would just provide the right amount of heat. And some of these buildings, what you do, like I say, is you turn on the jet of oil and alcohol. It was like this fat and alcohol mixture of like pig fat and some alcohol, whatever, some really good high octane alcohol mixed together. It's like pig fat and alcohol and maybe a little bit of tar in there. And I had people for doing that too, getting just the right mixture of tar, pig fat, and alcohol. And they made this goo that it was like the soppy stuff that could be pumped through the pipes, and it would go and it would rain down in these little jets and go all over the wood and coal mixture. Anyway, and it even had like an auto loading system where it could auto load it or something, or just pile it up, and then basically come morning you'd go and they would turn on the pump or they would pump it by hand, and they would pump it all, the mixture all through there, and come down, and then they would take a little thing, go, and just throw it in there, and they'd go, and it would basically just smolder. And then what they would do is they would control the air mixture coming into it. They would have shutter valves and a fan, and these big pipes were going along the thing, and then they would get all nice and hot. And then what they would do is they would starve the fire for oxygen. Like they would open it up and get it burning all nice and good, and then once they get pressure, then they would close the valves all off, and they're like 5 or 6 guys would go around. They would close all the shutters, and they would close the shutters, and then the fire would starve for air, and it would kind of die down, and they'd keep that pressure right there, and then they could basically run the mine all day long. They would run the dynos and they'd run everything. And I mean, sometimes if they're really pushing hard, they would have to recharge the system like 2 or 3 times, or like a 24-hour shift. If they're running 24 hours, they would have to recharge it like twice or something like that, or 3 times, depending on how hard they were running the steam drills. I forget how they used to lay out pipes. They used to have these big pipes, and they'd lock them together, and then they would have the steam drill right there at the front, and they'd have a steam pipe coming up and going into it, and they have different sections of pipe, and they would go chick, 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 chick. So the guy could just sit there, and then the steam drill could move forward and back, and they'd have like this swivel arm thing that would run the steam drill, and they go, and it would just swivel, and they would push it in there, and the big steam pressure thing, they go, and they would push out the auger, and it looked like a train kind of thing, and that's how we did the drilling for the mines. And they go, it would go onto this big conveyor belt, and then go, and then they would have these conveyor belts set up. And we did Central Park like that, and like 5 or 6 other mines where they would be doing that, and they would have these charge. Basically, it's a big building that basically operates as a giant stationary steam engine, and then they would just pipe the steam all the way down the hole with these big pipes. And so they would go in there and they would charge these things up. They would load them up, and then during the winter, sometimes when it was freezing cold, homeless people would sometimes sneak inside and get inside, and they'd go live in there and sleep in there. Because sometimes like over a weekend, or there'd be a week off or something where we wouldn't need it, and then they would go in there the next day to just light it up. Come Monday, and they would just if they didn't check it out, they would just throw it in there, and then there's all these homeless people, and they're like living in there, and they're suddenly like a wall of fire comes at them. And we lost 30 people died one time, 5 died another time. And the people would always be really upset. They'd be like, I didn't know. It's like, it's okay, it was an accident. I know. I was like, don't worry about it. It's an accident, it happened. They'd be badly burned. I mean, it usually wasn't all that bad. It was usually just people, and sometimes, that's why they always would go down there and check that out. And I'd actually pay them I'd be like, now come to work early. I want you to check the engine before you go down, before you light it, because you know how people always get in there. So anyway, they would go and check out the engine, make sure there was nobody in there. And then they would light it up, because with the alcohol and the cooking oil, I mean, how fast that'll burn. It'll just, and then and it's hundreds of feet to the nearest exit, and the exit's usually like way up there, and these little kids and people are trying to climb out, and it's a raging inferno, and then the smoke overcomes them, and thunk. Anyway, so I paid for people to go check out the engine before they lit it. But basically, there are these great big huge hallways, and you can still see them, doors, and then there'll be the little exits on the top, and there'll be little bars and stuff like that, and that keeps people from, because they would climb down inside the tubes. They would go up there, they'd climb down and go inside there, they'd sleep in there because it was warm. And it's like, well, I love you guys, and anyway, later on, we just built a house, and we were like, okay, if you're gonna be cold, you can go to the warming house. And so we had this just brick thing, and it had a little radiator and everything else like that. I actually was like, all right, yeah, go ahead and pipe it over there to the house, and so we would pipe it over there, and we'd have this radiator there, and then the people would be warming themselves next to the radiator, in the freezing winter, because it gets cold, like really cold. And so as my little, here you go, guys, and my workers would use it too. I think we built like 5 or 6 warming buildings or something like that for my workers too. They could go take their coffee breaks over there and stuff like that. So anyway, I mean, major mine operation. And then later on, when we weren't doing the mining, we converted them over to run textiles and other things. And then we were doing that. And then after that, we were using them to run power for the city. We just, they'd just charge it up, and then they would provide power for the city for all day or whatever, because when we switched over to DC and then AC power, these buildings were still there, and I had built them. So anyway, so they would just, and it would provide power for the workshops and the different machinery in the city. So anyway, and then it'd basically cook down and run all day. And they were made really big and really thick, and I think they were still pretty well tacked on all well, sometimes what they would do is they would go in and they would just basically shine the bricks, just take it down to the base level or whatever. They were really good bricks. I mean, they were like top dollar, most expensive, best bricks you could possibly make. So anyway, I think they went in there and they kind of cleaned them up a little bit towards the end there to just kind of because they were mine. So I was like, well, it's 150 years or 75 years of history. you know.